Welcome to the Korea Pro Podcast, your weekly guide to understanding the most pressing and complicated developments shaping South Korea. We're your hosts, Jeongmin Kim,
John Lei,
and Joon Ha Park of Korea Pro.
Go beyond headlines as we explain not just what happened, but also what really matters and why it matters.
If you monitor South Korea for work or just trying to keep up, you're in the right place.
This is the Korea Pro Podcast.
Hello, listeners, and welcome back to another episode of the Korea Pro Podcast. It is a new dawn, a new week. We have a new government and a new president. Now, on election night, I was at home very comfortably in my PJs, but Jeongmin, Joon Ha, you guys were at your respective camps. You guys were there to see all of the reactions. You guys were there to capture all of the speeches. Could you walk us through that night? What exactly happened?
Not my camp, but I went to the DP Situation Room and Joon Ha went to the PPP Situation Room, and it turned out the DP Situation Room was right in front of Lee Jun-seok's Reform Party room, which was interesting to see. The vibe was very different. It was packed in the DP one, but people went home very quickly after the exit poll looking at the gap. Joon Ha's room was quite different, right?
Yeah, so it was quite quiet. It was quite somber. Everyone was sort of not anticipating to watch how much the gap will be between Kim Moon-soo and Lee Jae-myung. But when the results came out, you couldn't hear a squeak in the room. Everyone was quite quiet.
You would think they would have already expected this sort of result. Why did they even show up? They could have just stayed home the whole time.
Well, the final week, Kim Moon-soo has been claiming that it was a poll blackout period, right? So looking at the trends before then, which Kim Moon-soo did have a spike a little bit. Kim Moon-soo was saying that he probably saw a golden cross, which did not happen. But the exit poll by KBS, MBC, and SBS, they so far since their start in early 2000s, they have always guessed the winner correctly, but the gap was kind of different from time to time. Looking at, depends on like how many early votes there were and so on and so forth. And this time around, it was not just this exit poll, but other exit polls as well, right? So there were multiple versions of it, but the main one projected initially that Lee will be 51.7 versus Kim Moon-soo's 36.9, but the actual gap was smaller, a little narrow. What was it? What was the gap?
It was a 8% gap, something like that, for Lee Jae-myung and Kim Moon-soo, putting Kim Moon-soo into the 40s percentile range, which was a much different figure than the one expected.
Right. So I guess like NBN or someone guessed it the closest, it seems, and Lee Jun-seok got around 8-point-something percentage point, which means that he does not get any reimbursement for his money spent on elections.
What a shame.
Poor Lee Jun-seok.
But it's still interesting. We will probably need to discuss this as standalone later. But men in their 20s and 30s, they preferred Lee Jun-seok over Kim Moon-soo, and also very high support among people in their 30s as well. And just overall, like both men and women in 20s and 30s, relatively speaking, to other generations, had higher support for Lee. Let's move on to the acceptance speech. So when we were trying to figure out what's happening overnight at the Situation Room. So we were at the National Assembly, and then there was a whole rally going on since early evening in front of Glad Hotel, in front of the National Assembly. That was a DP rally, and then all the major lawmakers and campaign staffers, right after the exit poll, they all went to that rally and started doing speeches and chanting and dancing and everything. And then around midnight, just before midnight, we heard from someone that Lee might be coming to Yeouido, not the Situation Room or the headquarters, on the stage to deliver an acceptance speech. So we went there and thankfully got into the reporter seats. So we got to see it pretty close. But initially, he was supposed to deliver the speech by like 12:30, right? But then Kim Moon-soo later on said he will do a like he's gonna do a press conference at 1:30 a.m. And then Lee started waiting. So he delivered his speech at around 1:10, I believe.
Sure. Yeah.
He made a 5-point speech, starting off with, I'm not confirmed winner yet, but very highly likely to win, blah, blah, blah.
Thanking the people.
Yeah, thanking the people. And it sort of came after the whole martial law documentary that the DP sort of put on the big screen. What was the main 5 points that he delivered that night?
So it was political reform, culture, society, the issue of North Korea, which came up, which surprised both of us. And back to...
We were eyeing each other. Joon Ha was at the photographer standing area, and I was sitting down on the row, and it was like, huh?
Both turned around at the same time. And then, of course, political reform, once again, just as an end note to end insurrection for all.
For context, Lee Jae-myung hardly mentioned North Korea during the campaign.
Right. So he did not mention North Korea by name during, he said Buk, but he did not go for like the full name or anything. But throughout the campaign, he was very much focusing on, U.S. alliance as the backbone of the South Korean defense. And he did not really touch on unification or anything, right? So it sort of was in line with that, the acceptance speech. But it was interesting. Acceptance speech and inauguration speech is very important. They pre-write it, weeks ahead. And the way he framed it in that foreign policy section, which the lead was North Korea, he said South Korea, based on a very strong deterrence and defense capabilities against North Korea, we have space to pursue dialogue. And he did not mention reunification or one people, compatriotism, whatever, but he talked about peaceful coexistence. And he did not really touch on U.S. alliance or anything during the acceptance speech, right?
No, he didn't.
Did he touch on it during the inauguration speech?
He did indeed. And during the inaugural address that he made the following day,
11 a.m.?
Yeah, 11 a.m. Right after he did the presidential oath, he mentioned that through a robust U.S.-ROC alliance, along with trilateral cooperation with Japan, they will continue to do so. For North Korea, he mentioned North Korea, I think about 3 or 4 times, where he was talking about how South Korea's current defense spending is more than North Korea's GDP.
Twice as North Korean GDP is what he said, right?
Yeah, and South Korea will do sort of a 2-track approach where they will have a robust strengthened deterrence with the ROC-US alliance against North Korean nuclear and military threats or provocations, as he mentioned.
He actually used the word provocation.
He did,
right?
And he used 도발, which is the Korean word for provocation. And he went on and said the second part of the 2-track approach, which is engaging in dialogue with the North.
Right. So this is interesting because a lot of the deterrence language that he's using right now, including North Korea denuclearization, it sounds like Yoon, but the end goal is kind of different. Like during the conservative administrations, they would use these pegs to say that, we have this power, we can deter them, would be the main thing. But now, like, he's playing off this, like, not only just in security aspects, but also like econ biz, like other sectors of the speeches, he is drawing, sort of feeding into the sense of national pride. And he's saying, we're strong enough. We don't have to be afraid. We don't have to be afraid of Japan.
South Korea.
Yeah. So it does track with what he has been saying during the campaigns, but we do have to keep an eye on it. There's no transition committee. So in the morning, 6:21 a.m.
Yeah.
The commander-in-chief role and the presidency was automatically transferred to Lee Jae-myung, after which he delivered the inauguration speech. And he did a call with the JCS and visited the JCS as well, right?
Yeah, so just after they certified his victory on yesterday morning, as you said, he called Admiral Kim Moon-soo, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and during the call, he urged Kim to lead the military in maintaining a thorough state of readiness. All the generic comments
the usual
on
stuff.
North Korea military sort of preparation, and also praising the armed forces' dedication and loyalty to the people during martial law for their 소극적 대응, which means
responding passively was, I think, what he mentioned. And then, of course, there were initial first day nominations per usual, following the precedent of what happened during the start of the Moon administration. Right now, we don't see major cabinet minister nominations just yet. It might change when this episode is going live, but we have PM, the Prime Minister nomination, NIS, National Intelligence Service, NSA, the National Security Advisor, and just a couple of more chief of staff. Who is the prime minister nomination?
Kim Min-seok.
Kim Min-seok. Who's Kim Min-seok?
Kim Min-seok is a 4-term lawmaker, and he was also the co-chair of Lee Jae-myung's campaign. So immediately when we saw this name pop up, you could tell, okay, Lee Jae-myung is now rewarding loyalty. And so he's building a team that is going to be answerable strictly to him.
Right, and this is interesting because usually, like both conservative and progressives in South Korea, when they win the election, the first nominations go to their comrades, right? The comrades who spent decades together until this win. But there was a bit of an outlier, which was Lee Seong-dong as a national security advisor, one of the highest position in South Korea. Lee actually not is a comrade figure, like he is a DP person right now. Since the Yoon versus Lee 2022 presidential election, but he is not a through and through party man, right?
He's not a long-time Lee ally.
Right. So who is Lee?
Lee Seong-dong is the former ambassador to Russia. He led the six-party talks on the south of South Korea in 2009. That was sort of stunted by the Yeonpyeong-do attacks.
That was a time.
Yes. And then moving forward, he became a DP lawmaker going into the Foreign Committee in 2024 April, and now he is the new national security advisor leading some of the discussions with Russia, North Korea, etc., etc.
Right, and I've heard from couple of people that he has been meeting behind the closed doors with diplomatic counterparts as well to explain Lee Jae-myung camp's, now the administration's point of view on multiple foreign relations issue. And he actually made name like during 2022 for fierce debates versus Kim Song-han, who became the NSA later under the Yoon administration. NIS nomination was interesting. It's Lee Jong-seok, who is a former unification minister and an academic. So it sort of goes to the usual progressive administration sort of routine to tap someone to head the NIS for someone who might be able to do backdoor channel diplomacy with North Korea and others as well. And chief of staff, this person is less known compared to the NIS, NSA, and PM. Can you walk us through him?
Yeah, so Kang Hoon-sik, he's a three-term National Assembly lawmaker. He represents, or he used to represent, Asan in South Chungcheong province. He held quite a number of senior roles in the National Assembly, especially for the DP. He was floor secretary for the industry committees, and he held the chair of the strategic planning committee within the DP and the chief spokesperson for the DP as well. So he's been a long time Lee ally. Lee looks to go for staunch loyalists at the moment.
Chief of staff is always a staunch loyalist. We could see that throughout the Yoon administration as well until the very last minute. It's usually a party man coming into the presidential office. And there was a first cabinet meeting under this new administration. Who were in the room and what was discussed, Joon Ha?
Yeah, so Lee Jae-myung, he presided over his first cabinet meeting just this morning. And the attendees included the Deputy Prime Minister, Education Minister Lee Joo-ho, along with all the remaining or what's left of the cabinet minister force under the Yoon administration, including the Finance Vice Minister Kim Moon-soo, Trade Minister An Deok-gun, Cho Tae-hyul, the Foreign Minister, and the Unification Minister Kim Min-seok.
Right, and just to remind our listeners, this is actually not abnormal because in the first few weeks, especially coming after no transition committee and no cabinet ministers nominated and appointed yet, this is actually quite usual to have the former administration people to actually work alongside the new administration picks for at least a few weeks.
Yeah, and what was reported was it was quite the sort of awkward, let's all get along sort of remarks from Lee Jae-myung. He said, the situation in your sectors best. We are representatives entrusted by the people. And I quote, let's try to smile a bit as we go. It may feel awkward, but I ask that you do your best.
Right, and there were a few people who tried to resign, but Lee did not take the resignation.
A bunch, not a bunch. All of them, actually. Lee Joo-ho spoke with Lee Jae-myung the other day and said all the remaining cabinet ministers have expressed their intention to resign en masse. Now, of course, Lee Jae-myung was never going to accept all of their resignations because he needs to have the majority of the cabinet still needs to be there for the State Council to function.
And also, they need a handover.
They do. And so he accepted the resignation of the Justice Minister. And so the Justice Minister is now, I believe, being taken over by the acting Justice Minister. But besides that, all of the other ministers who were in place since the last days of the Yoon administration are still there. And so when Lee Jae-myung said, hey, let's all get along and smile a bit more, they're not in the mood to smile all that much.
Right,
just
so-
a few days ago, their new boss was trying to get them all fired and lumping them together as insurrectionists.
That's true. And let's move on to, speaking of awkwardness, let's move on to just very briefly, the PPP meltdown, the ruling.